Okay, I want to talk about the slaves to these ancient gods or people that were giant of big stature. What I have up here is an open pit mining. This is the Twin Creeks gold mine in Nevada. And usually they go in, circles. I've talked about this as possibly being something that Tartarus was, but not the specific place, but the concept of a mine. But very interestingly, in Diodorus Siculus's The Library of History, he talks about the slaves that were used to work in the mines. And I've got a picture up here of a ancient Greek picture, or whatever you want to call it, of slaves working in mines from in a mine from ancient Greece. And I'm looking, and I can't tell gender. I mean, it's men, but it looks like Caucasoid type people, but they were probably of smaller stature, and for all we know, could have been children. And unfortunately, this whole concept of slavery is something that has been going on for quite a while. And the people that were responsible and still, are doing some of this have never really been taken to task. And it's basically, most of the time, it's children they go after who can't physically fight back. Children and women. The Arab slave trade really went after girls for sex slaves, and boys they'd castrate and use them as guards for their harems. And none of those people have been taken to task. And we hear quite a bit about the black slave trade, the North American slave trade, which was run by a lot of Dutch Jews. But we don't hear a lot about the white slaves. And I've done a little work on that about the Irish slaves. They tried to exterminate the Irish pretty well in the 1600s. And Cromwell worked with these Dutch Jews who had ships to ship over the white Irish slaves to the Americas and Montserrat and other places to use them and exterminate them and eventually breed them out with the oncoming black slaves. But the Greeks and everybody also had slaves, and it's pretty much, basically people that couldn't physically fight back, and they're taken captive. And the people that did this have never, haven't been taken to task, and, especially the Arabs. But let's get into this ancient story of how they used them to work in the mines. And I want to also touch on the Sumerian stuff, which I'm going to do in different videos. But let me read this. In this Diodorus Siculus's Library of History, they talk about how much these ancient giant people were into metals, and the Phoenicians. They were just, and the Iberians as well, they were into silver and copper and gold. And they would mold it, use it for all of their things. And they would use slaves to get this metal, or these metals, out of the mines. And they traveled all over the world to find these metals. And without a doubt, they went to the Americas, and that's covered up. But let's read what this says. But to continue with the mines, the slaves who are engaged in the working of them produce for their masters revenues in sums defying belief. But they themselves wear out their bodies both by day and by night in the digging under the earth, dying in large numbers because of their exceptional hardships they endure. For no respite or pause is granted them in their labors, but compelled beneath blows of the overseers to endure the severity of their plight. They throw away their lives in this wretched manner, although certain of them who can endure it by virtue of their bodily strength and their persevering souls suffer such hardships over a long period. Indeed, death in their eyes is more to be desired than life because of the magnitude of the hardships they must bear. And although many are the astounding features connected with the mining just described, a man may wonder not the least at the fact that not one of the mines has a recent beginning, but all of them were opened by the covetousness of the Carthaginians at the time when Iberia was among their possessions. It was from these mines, that they drew their continued growth, hiring the ablest mercenaries to be found, and winning with their aid many and great wars. For it is in general true that in their wars the Carthaginians never rested their confidence in soldiers from among their own citizens, or gathered from their allies, but that when they subjugated the Romans and the Sicilians and the inhabitants of Libya to the greatest perils, it was by money, thanks to the abundance of it, which they derived from their mines, that they conquered them in every instance. For the Phoenicians, it appears, were from ancient times clever men in making discoveries to their gain, and the Italians are equally clever in their leaving no gain to anyone else. Tin also occurs in many regions of Iberia, not found, however, on the surfaces of the earth, as certain writers continually repeat in their histories, but dug out of the ground and smelted in the same manner as silver and gold. For there are many mines of tin in the country above Lusitania and the islets which lie off Iberia, out in the ocean, and are called because of the fact the Castorades. And tin is brought to large quantities also from the island of Britain to the opposite Gaul, where it is taken by merchants on horses through the interior of Celtica, both of the Massilians, into the city of Narbo, as it is called. This city is a colony of the Romans, and because of its convenient situation, it possesses the finest market to be found in the region. Okay, I'm going to quit now. So basically, I just told you where this whole concept of slavery came from, and it was to dig out these metals out of the ground. And that's how these people, the Phoenicians and the Carthaginians, made their wealth and created this whole institute of slavery to get the metals to make tools and other things and swords. So, because they understood that these metals could be molded for tools and other things. That's what they created slavery for, is to dig out these metals from the earth all around. And then they moved on to sex slavery and all the rest of it. Before that, they would just go up and abduct the women, But a rather disgusting practice, but you can even argue that the whole concept of our society of work and all of that, and who controls our industry, and the way things are set up is also a form of slavery. It doesn't benefit us, it benefits those that own the corporations. My thing is, why aren't we on hemp oil when Henry Ford created a perfectly usable hemp car made of hemp plastic and running on hemp oil? But yet we're forced to be on oil from Arabs, who are some of the nastiest people and have some of the nastiest history of slavery, even up into the 20th century and even today, and have never been taken to task for it. We're forced to buy their oil for our transportation when we could have been on a hemp industry system and been completely 100% independent. And it was feasible. It was done. Henry Ford was ready to manufacture the hemp car, and that's when they came up with the anti-marijuana laws to prevent any of this, and quit allowing people to grow hemp. And up until then, and hemp isn't marijuana, but up until then they used it to make rope and paper. So we're forced onto some of these industries so that the elite who own these ridiculous resources that we really don't need can be filthy rich, and while we struggle and to pay our bills, and they live like gods and get away with their crimes. So this is where it comes from. I mean, this is ancient, thousands and thousands of years ago. As soon as someone figured out how to use metals, and they coveted it, and they wanted the power that came from making of tools, they had to get slaves to dig it out from the earth. And they would always go after people, probably mostly children. They'd snatch up first, force them to grow up and mine, just like they do nowadays in Africa, and just what they did to the white kids in America. Look into the history of how they made them, 5 years old and up, work in the coal mines or work in their factories. Well, they lived it up, and tell us all about how privileged we are today, and that we had enjoyed privilege. Well, no. So this is where it comes from. And it doesn't come from any aliens, any lizard people, any shapeshifter. I have yet to prove that nonsense out. It comes from these giant Caucasoid people out of ancient Phoenicia, and people caught on for the usage of metals. These Phoenicians and Carthaginians, and went on to the Semites who ran these slave trades. And I'll get into the Sumerian talk about the slave races that were created from humans that were probably of different color and certainly a smaller stature. That's it.